Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is going to be the first long form in about 3 months, so I hope you enjoy this one. As you can see here, I'm looking like a businessman, and this is going to be who's representing me for the foreseeable future of the channel. And so today we are going to be talking about Pokemon Champions, and more specifically the team I'm using. So if you want to use it, the stats are right here. And first up on the team is... Now we're going to be talking about Sneasler. So you see, Sneasler is what we call a menace in the competitive scene due to its extremely strong move Direct Claw and just the fact that it's very fast, hits very hard. And as you can see here, the 4 moves I'm running on it consists of Direct Claw, Fake Out, and Close Combat, as well as Protect. And I am running the White Herb item on it to activate its ability Unburden, which will double its speed once the White Herb is consumed. The White Herb is a item that activates whenever the holder's stats are lowered, and it will reset it to neutral. Close Combat lowers Sneasler's defenses, therefore activating its White Herb, therefore doubling its speed. Now, the move Fake Out is Sneasler's probably its greatest tool, since Fake Out is a priority move, which means that it goes before most moves, and Fake Out, when it hits an opponent, it makes them flinch, which is an effect that makes them unable to move unless they have an ability that prevents them from flinching in the first place. If you're not familiar with battles in Pokemon in general, you may not be familiar how powerful it is to prevent one of your opponent's Pokemon from moving in the first place. This is especially true for doubles, which is the format we are talking about today. In doubles, as you can probably infer from the name, there are 2 Pokemon on each side of the field at any given time. So Sneasler can provide excellent support with Fake Out. But the problem with Fake Out is that it only works on the first turn that the user is on the field. This can be reset when it is switched in, but due to Sneasler's EV spread that I put on it, it is quite frail but quite strong, so getting a Fake Out prediction wrong, and by prediction I mean trying to judge whether or not the opponent's going to protect, and Protect is a move that essentially just blocks all damage. So if I Fake Out with Sneasler into a Protect, that leaves Sneasler very vulnerable for the opponent's partner Pokemon to be able to essentially 1-hit KO Sneasler, since I am not running the Focus Sash item on it, which would allow it to survive on 1 HP. But since I'm running the White Herb, getting a Fake Out prediction wrong can be devastating. And so leading with Fake Out can sometimes be dangerous. And so that's why Sneasler's next move is going to be very important for this. It is known as Close Combat, which I discussed just earlier. Close Combat is a very powerful fighting type move. The fighting type is a very good offensive type, especially in the current meta, where Arcaldon, who is a Steel and Dragon type, is weak to it. And due to Arcaldon's somewhat middling defense stat, Sneasler can often threaten a 1-hit KO on Arcaldon, which is very useful since in double battles you can only bring 4 of your Pokemon, which means that every single KO means that you are essentially taking a quarter of your opponent's team. So getting 1-hit KO early on in the game is very useful. The main problem with this is that I'm trading off Sneasler's bulk for its offensive capability, and that means that once Sneasler has moved, it will usually just go down from like 1 attack, which is unfortunate because Sneasler is very good for some like its teammates' bad matchups. So getting a good turn with Sneasler is very important to the success of this team. Getting a bad turn with Sneasler, however, can be very detrimental, almost game losing every time it happens, because Whenever it happens, it essentially means I lose a quarter of my team without gaining much ground either. So essentially, I need to claw my way back into the game by making some smart reads, which can sometimes be a little hard to do. And that brings me to the next part of this breakdown of Sneasler, which is going to be its matchups. Sneasler has some pretty good matchups in the current meta into common threats like Archaludon, King Gambit, and Tyranitar. They're all very weak to close combat, which can mean that Sneasler can gain a lot of ground if it can pick up the 1-hit KO. The main problem is that some of these threats often have Protect, which can, as mentioned before, can be game losing if I get that read wrong. But threats like King Gambit often run the Choppleberry item, which means that they can nullify Sneasler's ability to pick up 1-hit KOs, therefore nullifying its ability to provide enough value for its lack of survivability. Unfortunately, despite its very good value, Sneasler still has a lot of bad matchups. One of these matchups, actually a lot of matchups, is just ghost types in general, because they are immune to Sneasler's very powerful close combat, which means, and now that I think about it, they're also immune to Fake Out, which means that essentially 2/3 of its attacking moves are not allowed to be used on ghost types, which can be very problematic, because that means Sneasler can only attack into one slot, which means that, you know, the opponent can just protect that other slot and therefore just take out Sneasler before it can do anything. And this, as you know, can be very bad for the survival of this team. This brings me to my next point about Sneasler's very powerful move, Dire Claw. Dire Claw is a poison type move that has a chance to inflict its target with a status condition. This can be paralysis, which slows the opponent down and has a chance to prevent them from moving entirely. It has a chance to burn, which deals small damage over time and halves their attack stat, and sleep, which incapacitates the opponent for like about few turns. Dire Claw used to be a lot stronger because these effects, well, the chance for one of these effects to be inflicted was 50%, I believe. But when Pokemon Champions released, this was nerfed to about 30%, therefore reducing the odds of inflicting a status condition in the first place. In fact, before Pokemon Champions, there was a website called Pokemon Showdown. It is still up today, but Pokemon Showdown was essentially the Pokemon Champions before Pokemon Champions. So even back then, Sneasler was very strong. So back then, if you used Sneasler, Dire Claw got a status condition pretty much every time you used it. But now, Dire Claw, for my personal use, Dire Claw has almost never triggered a status effect. In fact, today, while I was playing, I got my first ever status condition with Dire Claw. So even just like a 20% nerf to its accuracy, no, not accuracy, chance to inflict status conditions can be very contributive to how good its move can be. Dire Claw, with its poison typing, is still very useful in the current meta. Maybe not against like some of the bigger threats, but some of the more niche options like Mega Meganium or Mega Eternal Flower Floette, or just any powerful fairy types or grass types in general. Hitting those for super effective can be very useful, but Dire Claw doesn't have exactly the highest base power, so sometimes, I mean, most of the time you won't be picking up any like big KOs with Dire Claw. So it's useful to have, but it definitely isn't the best. I believe there is no better option other than Dire Claw. I believe Sneasler might get Poison Jab, but I'm not sure if that actually has higher base power or not. Now, there isn't much more to say after this, other than some of Sneasler's other like bad matchups. A big one is probably Trick Room. That is a field condition that reverses the turn order, essentially making slow Pokemon fast and fast Pokemon slow. That is a pretty bad matchup for Sneasler since I am running the Jolly nature on it, which means that it moves faster than most other Sneasler. So that's just another one. The Pokemon Aegislash with Ghost and Steel typing, also Wall Sneasler. But that's pretty much all I have to say. And the next Pokemon on this team I'm going to be talking about is going to be the Pokemon known as Now, Archaludon is kind of ridiculous because of its signature move known as Electro Shot. It is kind of overpowered. Electro Shot is a 130 base power electric type move that normally takes 2 turns to go through, but in the rain, which this team is built around, Electro Shot can actually go in 1 turn. And what makes this move even more overpowered is that, unlike similar moves such as Meteor Beam, Electro Shot actually boosts Archaludon's special attack stat by 1 stage, which, if I remember correctly, is about a 33% boost. Yeah. So it essentially turns into a walking nuke. The only thing that doesn't make this any more overpowered is that Archaludon isn't normally a electric type, it is a steel and dragon type. The reason this matters is because of something called the stab boost. It stands for same type attack bonus. If a Pokemon shares a typing with a move, that move will get a 50% boost in damage. So we should be thankful that Archaludon isn't an electric type. This was different in Scarlet and Violet, where the generational gimmick known as Terrestrialization allowed Pokemon to change their typing, which meant that Archaludon during that era were able to change their typing to electric, therefore boosting their electro shots. So if you decide to play Pokemon Champions after this, you should thank your lucky stars that Terrestrialization isn't legal yet. But now it's time to talk about Archaludon's stats and EVs, and moves, and ability, and typing. Anyways, so Archaludon is built to be a little bit more offensive than you would probably think. As you can see, we are running a plus special attack nature so that I can maximize the damage output by these powerful electro shots. I also have a good amount of speed invested into it to make it outspeed other Archaludon, maybe like some of the slower opponents. I also put a good amount of special defense because Archaludon has a infamously low special defense despite it being a literal bridge. And the extra stat point that I have over, I put into HP. I should probably put into something else though. Now, I'm not going to be talking about Archaludon too much in this video. I have a deadline to meet because of a few certain summons. So I'll talk into Archaludon a bit more into depth next video that I make on this, but right now what you need to know is that Archaludon matches very well into many of the popular Pokemon right now, especially all the flying and water types that are very prominent. This is important because due to my team being based on rain, my opponents would probably like to take advantage of it because rain boosts water type moves. But thanks to Archaludon, it can very easily deter different water types because, for one, as you know, Electro Shot is an electric type move, which is super effective against water types. Another thing is that Archaludon can also tank water type moves very well thanks to its dragon typing. And right now, a lot of the popular water types like Basculegion are physical attackers, which is a stat that Archaludon is very high in. On the other hand, the lower stat of the defense is special defense. Archaludon is pretty lacking in special defense despite it being a solid metal bridge. Yeah, so basically any like strong special attacker can threaten Archaludon with like neutral damage. Super effective is even worse. Even resisted damage can be pretty powerful at times. Some of these big threats include like Rotom Wash, surprisingly, like opposing Archaludon. I've seen Hydreigon, Mega Charizard Y. Any of these like really strong special attackers can very easily threaten Archaludon with almost a one-hit KO. The reason I don't run its other ability Sturdy instead of Stamina is because Archaludon is frail enough to take a lot of damage from these strong attacks, but it's not frail enough to actually make use of its Sturdy ability. But if it is like using Sturdy, then it's probably not going to be lasting too long anyways. And Archaludon's like maximum value can be found in situations where it's literally just sitting on the field almost the entire game. The goal is to keep it on the field, keep spamming electro shots, or just spamming really strong attacks. So I think that's gonna do it for this video. If you like this video and want to see more of what I'm talking about here, just check out the next video I have on this team. That's probably gonna be coming out in like a week or two. So stay tuned and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.